Hey, what's happening, everybody? The Job Guys back with you one more time. That is Nick over there. As always, Ryan is right over here. And we are recording today right before an important event. It is the Grand Slam, AEW. And speaking of important events, well, it's kind of been an important year, Nick, with everything that's gone on, from Vince McMahon getting suspended, then stepping down, all that has gone on with AEW so far this year. We were thinking, is this one of, if not maybe, the most important year in wrestling history? Ding, light bulb goes off. Well, what are the 5 most important years in wrestling history?
Excellent question.
So leave it to us two dummies to make a list about it. So that's what we're going to do today. Nick has his top 5. I have my top 5. They may be somewhat the same. We will find out. Neither of us knows what our lists are. Very important, Nick. Want you to expand on this. This is what is the most important year in our lifetimes, going back to 1980, the WrestleMania maybe era, the new era, TV era. Most important, not what's the best, and not what is your favorite. Nick, what's most important to the business?
Correct. And it is, and I'm glad you brought up 80. We're not going to go back. Like, obviously, the first wrestler stepping foot inside a ring is probably an important year in wrestling. But was I even alive? And I know that people know that this is no secret. You are a huge fan of the British Bulldog Bret Hart match.
Yeah,
I don't believe that year is going to make your top 10 list, just because that match
top 30 maybe.
Yeah, was, so it's not matches. It's not how many, and it can't be matches because Will Ospreay, he didn't wrestle earlier. So there were no good matches, but it's about the entire year and how it took culture as well, how it changed society, if you will. I know wrestling doesn't change all of society or anything, but was it big? Was it impactful as far as the television industry, as far as the pay-per-view industry, as far as larger than life characters, or even paraphernalia items or things that came out of wrestling, maybe, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely, man. So let's get right into it. I lost the rock, paper, scissors contest. So Nick, we'll let you go first. Your number 5 most important year in wrestling history. Give it a shot.
Well, and this is just mine. I don't know if this may upset some people, but I said 2022. This year, you got Vince McMahon, and I would be shocked if this is over. The deal surrounding him and the events surrounding him. There may be even more follow-up that could, even though he's been out, have repercussions that trickle back on to the WWE. So Triple H then takes over. Stephanie is in a new role. Tony Khan, I believe, he's coming into these
Nick
guys.
Khan, but yes.
I'm sorry, the other Nick Khan, yes.
Killer Khan.
But I thought that just in general, this is the Vince. I've never watched Ryan without Vince McMahon.
Right. It's crazy to think.
I've been watching my whole life. I've never watched without Vince McMahon so. We are, whether slightly, you're not going to come in and see a hand grenade thrown in by Triple H and blow up the whole industry, but you are starting to see slight changes. And over time, in my opinion, 5 to 10 years from now, I think we're going to look back and say this is where the WWE started to change in this direction. Good, bad, same. Well, maybe not. It won't be the same in my opinion, but
right.
This is where I think we're going to look back at this moment this year. This is a new era. Story writing, hiring of characters, using the developmental leagues, not just saying, look at him, he's huge, brother, and put him in the main event,
Right.
All that. And then on the other side, Ryan, quite the opposite on the other channel, I think. AEW implodes. And I do believe this is a turning point. If Tony Khan does not change how this company is run, with how many cooks there are in the kitchen, how many guys are able to book their own. I thought it was only Hogan, but apparently there's other guys that are booking their own way.
Brother.
And when you do that, you're going to run into problems. You're going to have, like me and you joke all the time, 6 different factions recruiting 14 different people on the same night.
Every show.
It's ridiculous. And so CM Punk calls out the company on that mic. I mean, calls out the boss, calls out basically everybody.
Sitting right next to him.
And you got physical altercations. I mean, this is not Roadblock and Big Ron Studd fighting backstage either. These are your dudes. The Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, CM Punk. These are your top level dudes. How do you bring CM Punk back into this locker room?
I don't know.
I don't know.
And do you need to?
These are all questions. In my opinion, these 2 events, just the 2 that I have here. And yes, there were great matches this year. We're not going into that. These 2 events, Vince McMahon out, Stephanie and Triple H in.
We never thought we'd see that.
No.
Like, we thought this guy would be on a respirator, still calling the thing from the hospital.
I thought I'd be
or the medical
dead.
Facility.
I thought I'd be dead before Vince gave up.
Vegas has you down 2-1.
Incredible. That would be 2022 gets my number 5 most impactful year of all time.
All righty. All right, for mine, number 5, I'm going to go way back to pretty much the beginning of the Vince era, and I'm going to say 1983. I got 1983 at number 5 because this was truly the beginning of the golden era. This is Vince setting up what's going to happen in the couple years to come. This right here, and I don't think a lot of people think about that. Vince withdraws he buys the company the year before. He starts putting everything in motion in 83. He withdraws from the NWA. He starts buying up syndication all around the country. All-Star Wrestling and Championship Wrestling. The precursors to Superstars and Challenge, which were huge when you and I were kids. Starts buying other markets. He starts running shows in California. Had never done that before. Los Angeles and San Diego. That's just WWF. You had impacts with your feuds that you hear dudes talk about all the time still today. That Snuka Morocco feud. Snuka coming off the cage. Yeah, that's just one moment, but look at what that impact did. You hear all the ECW guys, from Foley to Dreamer to the Sandman to Bubba, they were there, and you can see them on camera, and they all say that was one of the biggest things ever. Hogan wins the first ever IWGP Championship over Antonio Inoki. We're talking worldwide here. Another huge thing that happened, it maybe set the ball rolling for Hogan to come to Vince. That Super Sunday show, AWA Super Sunday against Nick Bockwinkel, he was supposed to win the belt, didn't end up winning the belt because whoever you believe, Vern wanted some of his money from t-shirts and whatever in Japan. Hogan said no, so he said, all right, brother. They dusty finished, didn't win the belt. Ball starts rolling. Vince bought all those guys. You think about 84, but he got all those guys in 83. Piper, Hogan, Orndorff, Dr. D, Greg Valentine. Those guys came over right after Starrcade. The first ever Starrcade is in 1983. Other big thing, going back to television, Southwest Championship Wrestling used to be on USA Network. I don't know who watched it, whatever. Joe Blanchard, Tully Blanchard's dad, had it on USA. They canceled that and put All American Wrestling on USA. That was the very first show on the USA Network from WWF. All this stuff. And then you see the fruits of this year down the pipe. 1983, man. That was really the setup for what was to come. And bigly, I think there's a famous guy that says, bigly important.
You sure, Ryan?
I have no. Yep, keep going. Maybe we see that again. But yes, it is.
One thing I did forget. Another huge show that you hear about till this day. The Star Wars shows in WCCW. Those were big shows in the Freebirds Von Erich feud. The Christmas Star Wars and Thanksgiving Star Wars were also huge shows along with Starrcade that you still hear about today that really set up the Super Show. So, well, one last thing. There we go. All right, Nick. How about a number 4 from you?
Number 4. And this one, it is a little from me, but it might be a little biased, but I'm going to go 1987, Ryan. 1987. Wrestling has hit the mainstream. There's no doubt. When it goes on MTV, with Piper and Cyndi Lauper and things like that. Obviously, that happened earlier. But this is your Hogan Andre is the greatest feud in the history of wrestling, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion. WrestleMania 3 sets the bar for pay-per-views. This is the greatest pay-per-view in the history of wrestling.
Tell him, brother. Get him.
This is where the power lies.
This whole pay-per-view from top to bottom, the way it was marketed, the first two, and me and you clash on 2, so I'm not being biased. I like 2, you're not so big on it. But these, again, so much of the card on 1 and 2 are just matches. They're big name dudes who are just thrown in together. Yep. This makes you expect more. The Hearts and Danny Davis versus Tito and
Bulldogs.
Yep. There's a feud. Savage Steamboat feud. Hogan Andre feud. Billy Jack Hercules feud. Piper Adonis feud. Everything is feuding. Every match matters. There's not just a match thrown on this card. JYD, this to me sets the stage. And then also piggybacking that year, you get another pay-per-view. The second ever now. We're starting a trend. This is starting the rolling of now. God knew we were going to go to sometimes 2 a month now. The Survivor Series 1987, where everybody's on the card in a different format. I thought that was huge. Macho Man takes off. The Mega Powers, Elizabeth gets them that summer. Hogan will come out and save Macho Man from the beatdown. The seeds are planted for what I will say is the second best feud in WWE history, Hogan Macho Man. Jim Crockett Promotions are going to purchase WWF, which is a very huge move for them, combining those. War Games. We're going to get it this November, correct? The first annual War Games match will take place in 1987. Bruno Sammartino, the living legend, will wrestle for the last time in the WWE in 1987. I thought that was also huge. And here's one from me, because this is kind of personal. Although I did not play it, I'm a gamer. WWE releases its first wrestling game in 19. I
didn't know that.
It is huge to me. I mean, this is a big market now. Every year you're getting a game, Micro League Wrestling. It was on Commodore 64 and Atari. But it will start to get to what people have told me today are pretty intense games that you can really develop into. And
you got to start somewhere, man.
Right.
We're like 2-bit era back then.
I also had on here, and this might be more big for you, Ryan. The Torch starts.
My boy Wade.
Yeah, there you go. I believe that's the first year of the Torch, which is a pretty big wrestling
magazine. Like 16 years old.
Right. So yeah, I mean, so that gets rolling. And those are my big reasons on that 1987. I cannot underestimate the Hogan Andre. This took it, and I'm taking nothing away from like Piper or Orndorff or any of those guys. How many did that Saturday night's main event draw in 88 again, Ryan?
33 million.
Piper and Orndorff aren't drawing 30.
I don't think Queen Elizabeth just drew 33. I think she drew 28 million. Think about that for a minute.
Right there. This is the Hogan Andre feud. That 87, that year, culminates into that. And you don't get those anymore, man. There's no way. I mean, these guys on either show, on any show, are going to draw this on a Friday freaking night, man.
Well, Nick, think about this, too. You're talking about people. WrestleMania 3 proved whatever you think the number is, it proved they could not only go into football stadiums, which they have done, but you could sell them out. You could fill them, which nobody had done
and
to that point.
To expect the sellout for WrestleMania now.
Yeah.
I put 93 in here one year. Okay, well, you better be doing it,
Yeah.
That's why when you get to some of those other WrestleManias down the road where it starts to dip, you're like, are there even like 25,000 people in this building? Like,
yeah, I had 87 as an honorable mention. Two more things though, just to expand on what you said, because I had both of these written down. Crockett and buying Bill Watts. That was the beginning of the end. That's when he overshot himself. He spent too much money, ended up going bankrupt, then had to sell to Ted Turner. So that was a huge, huge purchase right there. And then the Survivor Series. Well, why did Vince create the Survivor Series? To go against Starrcade. So now we got some wars going, and he told the pay-per-view companies, hey, if you take them, you ain't getting WrestleMania. And then you got the counter programming on the very first Clash of the Champions against WrestleMania 4. So that's when they start, you know.
87 for me, number 4, man.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I'm going to rewind 3 years for my number 4. 1984 is my number 4.
In the early 80s.
Yeah, staying right there. So if 83 was the build, like laying the groundwork, this was the outbreak, 1984. 84 was the outbreak of what Vince was going to do. Hogan wins the title right away. He's not even in the company a freaking month. He wins the title January 23rd. A jump ahead to the summer, the Rock and Wrestling connection starts. I think people think it started in 85. No, it started in the summer of 84. Cyndi Lauper showing up because Captain Lou is in the Girls Want to Have Fun video. He turns on her. All that happened on Piper's Pit. They have the brawl to end it all July 23rd. Moolah against Wendy Richter on MTV. Again, I don't think people remember that. The war to settle the score. Quake on the Lake. But no, they I don't think people remember this. This was really like the beginning of TV also. What's so funny? You didn't like that? It rhymes.
Is John Tenta wrestling?
I'm not a fish.
So this is like where he really takes over with TV too. TNT debuts on USA. Super important here. Black Saturday. July 14th. Black Saturday. He buys the time slot on TBS, takes it over, sells it back a year later. They say that's how Vince paid for WrestleMania. You know, you believe what you believe, but he sold that back. But huge, buying that time slot on TBS. The Briscoes sell their share of Georgia to Vince. Vince buys Maple Leaf Wrestling. Vince buys Stampede Wrestling.
Straight cash, homie.
I mean, this is the takeover. This is it. I mean, play Ether. You know, this is it. Piper's Pit debuts at the beginning of the year. Moolah is another one that I don't think people realize. Moolah, like, owned women's wrestling somehow. And Vince pretty much bought Moolah. And with her came every woman's wrestler on Earth. Say what you want, but that was the Rock and Wrestling connection. That was the Cyndi Lauper connection. So that was huge. One thing is also big, maybe in a bad way, but it got a lot of eyeballs. December 28th, John Stossel's report on 2020 with Dr. D when he levels him in the back.
I'll ask you the standard question. You know?
Standard question.
I think this is fake.
You think it's fake?
What's that? Is that fake? Huh? What the hell's wrong with you? That's open hand slap, huh? You think it's fake? Huh? What do you mean?
Maybe not, it's a black eye, but it was eyeballs that came on the product. That's just the WWF. Hulkamania takes over in 84. Let's go to the other organizations. David Von Erich dies on May 6th. And then they have the huge tribute to him. Talk about football stadium, where the Cowboys play, Texas Stadium. They had 35,000 people in there to see Kerry Von Erich beat Ric Flair for the title. That's huge. Second Starrcade that year. And one other thing, Pro Wrestling USA debuts. where they all came together. Jarrett's Corporation, Vern, Ole, the Crockett's, they all came together, and they came together quick because they knew. I mean, think about it. It was September when they formed Pro Wrestling USA and have their very first show. So it took them about 9 months to go, oh, crap, we need to form together because Vince is taking over the world. 84, man. Mass. And then we didn't even talk about Japan and Mexico and all the other. I mean, what a year. What a year. 84.
Awesome.
Number 3, Nick, what do you got?
Number 3, Ryan, I had 2001. Vince buys WCW and puts an end to the Monday Night Wars.
Huh.
I don't think it's a great year for me, but its impact. This is the end of, and people aren't going to want to hear this, real competition. I'm sorry. An actual real competitor on the other show, which made our wrestling that era better. I mean, if one guy wasn't working out, I mean, what would it have been if there was only one show for Stone Cold Steve Austin or guys like this, man? Only got one chance. Yeah, he you know, I mean, he was a Hollywood blonde, man. You know, it just having both the shows really gave people, you know, a second chance or a different light, and it gave us 2 products on there. And if one was not doing well, what's on the other station? And these were shows. We're talking 2 shows that they're not bragging about beating WWF, the NXT developmental. Good for them.
Good for them, right?
They're going head-to-head with Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
In that time slot.
Yeah.
And it comes to an end because WCW got bought by Vince. Shane McMahon, Vince show up. They're both aired on the same show that night. The angle we all wanted to see. The real NWO angle, right? This is it. They're coming together. WCW versus WWE, and they botched the frickin' angle, dude.
You blew it!
They completely botched it. They ruined something that was so amazing. This year is just so memorable to me. And for some people, WrestleMania 17 will go down of one of the best WrestleManias in people's minds. I thought that was pretty big for them. 9/11, how about that? Doesn't stop WWE. The show keeps
company.
The show keeps rolling, and I believe they're one of like the first to come back and hold a massive live audience.
Very first.
And because of the 9/11 attacks, Raw is War is changed to WWF Monday Night Raw. They say because of 9/11 and because the end of the war actually happened, they switched the title of Monday Night Raw, and that becomes a major stay. But to me, the end of WCW, Ryan, was just so unbelievably sad to me.
Yeah.
And I know that, and it even frustrates me more that there were literally people that were cheering. You know, that people like, haha, I chose the right side. Great, now we only have one show.
Right.
You know, so I really, that brought out, and it was 2 quality programs, even to me better than SmackDown versus Raw. The WCW title and the WWE title were, to me, you know, if you held either one, you had reached the pinnacle of wrestling.
Look at that lineage for the NWA belt, you know?
And they took that away from us. I will never forget 2001. I will never forget how sad I was when Shane McMahon walked out there. And I was one of the people that wanted Bischoff to buy it. I wanted Bischoff to run it. I don't know how good or great it would have been, but it would have been definitely another company that definitely could have improved the product. And I think at that point, you start to see a decline in wrestling. When there is only one product, I can give you Joe Schmo versus Jim Bob.
What's a Jim Bob?
Note, awaiting request.
Hell, hey. They're going to be excited when they tell me he debuts tonight, man. They're like, I'm supposed to know him, man. You know, but yeah, I think that 01 gets my 3rd slot, man, on the countdown. I not for a good reason either. Not for absolutely terrible.
Good. It's important though. I mean, it's absolutely important. Number 3 from Nick, 2001. Number 3 for me. Man, they were all tough. Like, I have so many years, and we're going to do some honorable mentions that could probably easily be here. I had a hard time with 1, 2, and 3. I can make an argument. Anyway, I am going at number 3. I am going 1996. 1996 changed wrestling for the absolute. Thank God that it did. Yeah, right. Hogan turns. I mean, I could probably just say that, and then maybe go Austin 316, and then go, see ya, we're done. I think everybody knows that, but Hogan turns is so big, and the shockwaves that set, and then the things that happened because of Hogan turning. You can't even quantify it. What you cannot. Just huge. And it all happens, a lot of this, the curtain call. Sounds so stupid, but if the curtain call doesn't happen, Triple H wins King of the Ring. Austin 316 doesn't happen. I mean, just the chain reaction there.
You're watching
is incredible. Yeah, you may be. And Hall and Nash showing up, NWO, they start doing things, television, they start producing it differently than we've ever seen. They got baseball bats, the lawn dart, all that stuff that we've talked about on other shows. They did 45 minutes outside of the ring, shut their show down and shot it in a parking lot that made it look like real life. This was really when we started seeing that. A little more edgy, maybe not the adult kind of stuff that happened a few years later, but more edgy, more real life, starting to blur the lines between reality and fantasy and all of that. Brian Pillman was a big part of that. The Bischoff-Vince feud in real life. The war was happening. You had the Huckster and the Nacho Man on the one channel, and you can't take away ECW either. It was getting bigger. There was a groundswell. Not everybody got to see it, but there was a groundswell with this. And then other people stole those ideas. They stole those ideas and put them on each Monday night show. But the insider terms and things, we didn't hear that stuff before. And I think I know you're going to have more to say on this later, or I suspect that you're going to have more to say on this later, but I was reading a Complex magazine article from a few years ago, and I want to give whoever it is credit, and I guess I forgot his name, but Complex magazine, shout out to you.
There you go.
He said every company's product is unrecognizable in 1997 from 1995. And why is that? It's because of 1996. It completely changed the game and set us off to a product that we still kind of have today. You watch Raw, it's kind of the same still as it was back then, obviously. But 1996 is the reason why that those shows, you wouldn't think you're watching the same product because of what they did in 96. So, 96, I know you're going to have more to say. I assume that you're going to have more to say on that. So I'll end right there and let you fill in the gaps with the rest of that, Nick. How about number 2 from you?
Number 2 for me, it is 96, right? I got 96 at 2.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's convenient. There we go.
And I'm just going to, it's the end of, without 96, I don't know that me and you are still watching wrestling.
No chance.
I'm not going to watch TL Hopper or Mantar or the Berserker or the Undertaker. I'm sorry. I ended up having to watch him.
All Elite Scooby-Doo.
All those cheesy gimmicks. This became, and I was going to piggyback a little what you said, the reality era starts here. This is reality. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are their names. And you will start, I believe they even start dropping. We had never heard someone well, maybe we had. I shouldn't say never. But they're using Terry's name.
Yeah.
They're saying Terry instead of Hulk Hogan. When they say, Piper comes out, Halloween Havoc, I'll go on a limb and say that period of time from the best pay-per-views I have ever, slew of them, will start at Hog Wild, War Games, Halloween Havoc, World War III, Starrcade. are the best set of pay-per-views I think that have ever been dropped in a line together. They're so rewatchable. I just watched that period again this year.
Yeah.
I was texting you back and forth. That's why. And again, there are people out there. I know the Austin era, 97, 98, all these. You can't have them without 96. 96, and you hit that curtain call has to take place. As bad as it may have been for those people in Triple H, I think it actually benefits Triple H because they were going to push him back then as something that was not maybe the best thing. They take a step back, more development on Triple H. He even becomes a legend in the industry. Austin,
yeah, I think he turned out okay.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think I need to go in on Austin anymore on that in his rise, but because you're talking about this, in my opinion, if you want to argue one, I can't argue against. I'm not going to argue against you. Austin and Hogan are the two biggest names in wrestling history.
Yeah.
And both of them have their moments. Hogan has another moment that year, but I would say probably might be his second biggest moment other than slamming Andre. Maybe, I don't know.
I think it may be 1 and 1B.
I think
1A,
so.
1B.
I mean, it's that, and it is that big, and then Austin shoots off.
I'm not wearing a Hogan slamming Andre shirt. Either are you.
I guess that's true. This and what is, Ryan, the best-selling shirt in wrestling history?
Well, Austin 316, I think, but yeah, 1 and 1A. Here, 1A, 1B.
316 starts in 96.
Yeah.
And
well, you know what's funny, Nick?
96.
He wasn't on the next 3 pay-per-views.
No. Nuts.
But they had to go with him eventually because these guys, NWO, were blowing up the world. So they knew they had to go with it. They knew they had to change their style, and then we got what we got.
Yes, sir. That 96 is my number 2. That year is from Hall coming over to the Outsiders showing up, and what it did to WWE, forcing them to step up their game. I don't want to watch your geriatric gimmicks out there or whatever. I don't want to watch a football player or a hockey player or somebody or a race car driver.
Right.
Still got that. But it's just, I think it's such an important year. I really do. 1996 is my number 2.
I thought that was going to be your number 1 there for a second. I'm a little surprised there. All right. Number 2 for you. Number 2 from me. And again, this is, man, I put it in a hat tomorrow and I might pull out another year. Number 2 for me, 1985. 1985 is number 2. This was the year, I talked about 83, 84. Well, this is the year it blew up. This was the year you really saw the national exposure. Wrestling, the boom, the explosion. Every day was 4th of July. Start the war to settle the score. Another MTV moment. This is the one everybody remembers.
I would compare it to a Springsteen concert. It was pretty hot.
Lauper, Piper, Mr. T, one of the biggest actors in the world coming out here. And that set up WrestleMania, which we know, obviously, they're still doing today. 39 years later now, we're working on the biggest event of all time to that point. The night before WrestleMania, there was something, I forget, something happened with the host of SNL. Hogan and Mr. T end up hosting SNL. That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. Then
Hogan refused to work with the other guy, I think.
Is that what it was? Yeah, he was just supposed to be in one sketch, and he said, "That doesn't work for me, brother.
That doesn't work.
I need the whole show."
Brothers, bro.
Sports Illustrated, a couple of weeks after that. Kids, if you haven't heard of magazines, they were things we had before the internet. Sports Illustrated, the biggest sports publication of all time. Hogan is on the cover of that spring. Saturday night's main event then fills in once a month or every other month for Saturday Night Live. Pro wrestling had not been on television in prime time, and granted it's late at night, but still prime time, for 30 years. And it's taking over SNL's time slot. You can't talk about how big that was, how big that is, even today. And not just that, they started airing on other networks around Nesson in Boston. You know, they were already on the MSG network. That's like Boston's MSG network, where the Red Sox play, and they're airing their house shows on there. Primetime debuts, Coliseum Video, because VHS had really blown up in 84, 85. Now you get to have this stuff at your house if you didn't have closed circuit and weren't able to go watch WrestleMania. Well, now you can buy it. That fall, Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, a stinking cartoon of wrestling on Saturday morning. Then they go into your tape player. The wrestling album, your record player, comes out that fall. Vince sells back to Crockett the time slot. They say that's what paid for WrestleMania. I mean, just, you cannot, this is the explosion. And then you look around the other companies, man. The very first Super Clash from Pro Wrestling USA is that, I think, spring. 288,000 at the gate. 21,000 were there. That's huge. Mid-South debuts on TBS. Pro Wrestling USA debuts on ESPN. Wrestling is everywhere at this point. Both huge cable stations, Vince syndicated all over the country. I mean, this is it. Hogan was everywhere. They start getting baseball cards then, trading cards. They signed a deal with Topps that year. So now kids got your little cards that they're trading.
Even Barry Horowitz has a card, man.
Yeah, even Barry Horowitz. The toys, this is absolutely huge, man.
For life.
So, number one, Nick, the greatest, most important year of all of the times.
All right, Ryan, my number one year, and you've already hit it. And this is why, for the same reason that I put 96 above 97 and 98, I battled with this because you told me I can only pick one. Me and you got on the phone. I'm like, dude, can't we pick eras, man? Can't I pick like multiple?
We talked about the era,
I was like, come on, man, you're killing me here.
It's tough.
And you made such a compelling argument with 84 and 85. It almost makes me want to backtrack. But Ryan, 83 is my number one year because nothing happens without 83. This is the year Vince withdraws from the National Wrestling Alliance. If he does not
expect this, all right.
He withdraws. He starts buying. This, to me, this is Scott Hall showing up on Nitro. This is that big. Hulk Hogan turning heel or whatever you want. This is as big as anything because this is 316. It's not over yet. You're like, you're not. I get what you're saying, and that's why it's hard to pick because 84 and 85 are steroids.
Yeah,
coming through.
We're coming for you.
If he doesn't, are we still watching territories today? I mean, obviously, maybe someone comes along, I don't know, Bezos or something, and he buys wrestling. But that, to me, even on top of, I wrote the other stuff, the Road Warriors debut, arguably the greatest tag team. I'm not a fan, but I would have a hard time not putting them in the top 1, 2, 3.
A lot of other people are. Yeah.
So, I mean, and like you said, WWE goes to USA, but Vince, he's withdrawing. He's basically saying, I'm out of NATO. I'm going to start my own alliance here. This is huge. And you can't have aliens without Alien. Yeah. You can't have Empire without A New Hope. You can't have Bogus Journey without The Excellent Adventure of Bill and Ted.
Bogus!
No, but you can't. You get what I'm saying, Ryan.
What about Bogus Sting?
There's a bogus sting.
Yeah, this is the year, man, for me that just because of that, the ball starts rolling. He's going to buy. He's coming, and they know it too. Like you said, 9 months later, they're forming an alliance. This is, for me, that impactful because the era of the territory is done. Vince McMahon is like barbed wire on the open range. The era of the cowboy has come to an end. The open range is settled, my friend. Like,
read a book before
there you go.
start.
You got a history book. Yeah. But that is it, man. It's it's over.
Barbed wire on the open range.
It crushed the era of the cowboy, man. Now it's closed. The West is settled, my friend. The wrestling industry is settled. He's buying everyone, man. That's why it's number one for me.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't think about it because it was mostly behind the scenes stuff. And Hogan was only on one show in 1983. You know, he didn't show up till the very end. And then Piper and those guys as well. They were there at the very end. But it's the behind the scenes stuff that is important. You know, offering to buy Vern out, and Vern wouldn't sell. And he's like, all right, I'm taking your dudes.
I wish we could have the phone call. I know this sounds kind of morbid, or in the room when Vince withdrew from the national. I wish we could see what the other people must like.
Right. What are you doing?
What are you doing? You know,
that'd be, oh my gosh.
See the reactions, like, is this mother bleeper gonna do what I think he's gonna do?
Yeah.
Is he gonna try to wreck the rest of us right now in front of our faces?
It's the opposite of like, you're a history teacher. I don't know, name me like signing some treaty or the end of war when they're signing. This is the opposite. This guy, instead of coming in, and it was at the NWA convention, he came in and said, oh, I'm going to war with you guys.
Yep.
You like,
and that
it crazy.
And for me, that's why I'm just a big builder. The other years are actually better and might be bigger in the aspect. You laid down some phenomenal freaking reasons. You had me sitting there going, Jesus, man, okay. You know, but I still got to go with it just because it rolls the ball.
I had a hard time not putting that higher. And I think if you have it, absolutely, because like you say, if it weren't for this, there wouldn't be that. That's a tough thing to not argue.
And I mean, it's really weird too. I would love to see because they thought Wrestling World was ending when he did this. You're going to ruin it. It's over. It's done. You're crushing it. It certainly didn't get crushed. It's great conversation. Would it have been better with multiple federations?
Yeah.
Or was it better because Vince consolidated and made it this global conglomerate that reached everybody's home?
Because every one of those territories was selling tickets like crazy. Mm-hmm. But Vince's whole thing was cable TV.
Yeah.
And somebody was going to do this. Because like we said, Joe Blanchard was already on USA.
Right.
You know, so
somebody was going to come.
He was going to do it.
He was. Right. You look at all those guys. Junkyard Dog, who was as massive in WWE. But all these guys, Ted DiBiase, these guys were running federations when he took them, man.
Yep.
Like he took that when they were running these federations. And it starts in 83.
Yep. No question. All right. So my number one is 2001. 2001 is the most important year in wrestling history because that's when it ended to me. This is when wrestling as we knew it ended. Because not only did Vince buy WCW, the biggest competition he ever had since buying and going to war and all that, national TV show, the guys that kicked his butt for a while, not only did he buy them, ECW went out of business too. And you can say what you want about ECW, and I'm not a fan, but they went like the week before WCW, all at the same time. So you literally went from 3 companies that are national to 1 gone, all of them at the same time. And you said they botched it, and I think that's also why it's important. Because of the way it went down, it sent wrestling into a downward spiral for 20 years. Now, you had a couple peaks here, you had a couple things that were cool here and there, but as a whole, I mean, you went from think about whatever you had. None of those WCW fans switched over. They lost that almost entire audience. So a couple million people that were watching on Monday quit watching. And then their numbers went down and down and down. That now they're celebrating when they break 2 million fans. And I know TV's different and everything, but it just sent the company in a spiral. And it's pretty crazy, man. You think about it. Because none of those guys came over. None of the big names came over, so we didn't get to see. Yeah,
guaranteed contract. They're not going to break their contract. I wouldn't have either.
We didn't get to see what we thought we were going to see, and it was never the same. It just wasn't the same, and it changed everything. And you can even think about from that night, he fires Jeff Jarrett live on TV. Well, then Jeff goes and creates TNA. So, and then we had that. But anyway, arguably the best WrestleMania of all time. I don't think so, but arguably the best WrestleMania of all time that year. Paul Heyman goes to WWF. That's a major moment in history for everything he's done in the past 21 years in and outside of that company. But yeah, I just think that is the most important thing because it changed everything. Just like Vince changed things when he bought all the companies. Well, now they're all gone. They're all gone. And there's nothing left. And he's just standing there on the top of the mountain by himself. It completely changed everything we know until really TNA had their moments. But till really this AEW thing blew up 3 years ago.
And I think the only reason AEW did so different than TNA is because I don't think the hatred of WWE was there when TNA took over.
And I don't think there would be the hatred without Vince being on top and being able to do just whatever he wanted to do because there's no competition.
It really sets up because I'm a firm believer TNA 05, 04 to 10 is better than AEW currently. I just had more guys. My own opinion. I'm sure millions of people disagree with me, but they had more people I'd rather watch. Yeah. But yeah, you and me and you talked about this. Almost fell into like a 93 to 95 funk where a little bit after 2002, 2003, 2004. Me and we're still like we're paying attention.
Barely.
Yeah, but
barely. And there was pay-per-view. There was no network, so you had to buy the pay-per-views. I'm like, I'm not buying a JBL pay-per-view. I'm not buying. Sorry, like some of these other guys, I'm not buying them. Absolutely. Honorable mentions. I had a hard time. Let me say this one just to follow up on what you had at number 5. We did this whole thing because of this year, and I had hard. I was going to have it in here the whole time, and then at the end I'm like, you know what? For 2022, I got to go with an incomplete because we're in it. I fully expect this to be one of the most important years of all time. And right now I got it at number 6. That's pretty darn important. But I would say it's incomplete because think about this. Triple H takes over and everybody's super excited about that. And most people seem to be happy with what he's doing. But are you surprised? Like Vince resigned and it was like no one cares. Now I had a feeling the wrestling community might not care because they've hated him for a while. But I'm talking even mainstream. Like nobody cares. You're not hearing about this anywhere. It's not on Entertainment Tonight like the scandals back in the day. Like everybody was just like, oh really? And they've just moved on. So I wonder, I thought Vince resigning would be like the biggest thing in the history of wrestling, and nobody's talking about it. It got upstaged by the CM Punk stuff, it got outstaged by the Young Bucks stuff, and it's been outstaged by Triple H just being, but it is a huge year. 2 nights of WrestleMania. They have proven that they can do 2 nights and sell 70,000 tickets. Austin came back. That's huge. What's going to happen with AEW is huge. I think this is a very, very important year. That's my first honorable mention. I got a couple more, man. Nick, you want to rip a few off?
It's going to sound bad, but 93, Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
Goes up. I really do think 93, Monday Night Raw is the flagship show. Monday Night Raw is the new standard bearer. It's almost like we're getting a Saturday night's main event every Monday night.
With all of the controversy in the back, the steroid scandals. 91, Dr. Zahorian was convicted for dealing steroids. And this kind of went on for a few years, so 93 fits into that. Vince announces the drug policy shortly after that. You had the Ring Boy scandal. Hogan had to go away in 92. No matter what they say, Hogan had to go away. Or just like, how about you just slide out of here for a little bit? We'll see you in a year or so. But 91 and 92 together, I know that's cheating. But you had Flair leaving the NWA, coming to WWF. WWF leaves NBC after being there, after as big as it was, because ratings started sliding. They start Tuesday in Texas in 91. First time we'd seen them try a pay-per-view that wasn't like, one of just a random, hey, let's see if we can sell some pay-per-views here. And now look what we have. We have one a month at least. AWA finally closed. Big G1, Andre retires. But the big thing there that's important is the whole controversy backstage thing.
Yeah.
That's what makes it super important to me. I have 87, as I said. How about... Yeah, go ahead.
95 Monday Night Wars start.
That's when it starts, yeah. That's big.
WCW launches a rival product. You get Lex Luger showing up unannounced without a contract, he's wrestling. And I think that starts putting in people's minds, we got to hammer these guys down. Yep. Like, I cannot have this dude on my show losing or beating my champ one night, and then he just shows up on the other show.
And they did it 2 years later with Rick Rude. Not that he was, but still.
Right. Yes, they got that. But yeah, I just, for little things like that, I think that was kind of a huge year to go head to head. Gave us that rival product. Yeah. And really sets us up moving.
99. Unfortunately, Owen Hart. ECW goes to TNN. Bischoff relieved of his duties, and in comes Russo and Ferrara. Huge. Other big thing, and I had a hard time leaving this off, it has nothing to do with the product, but WWE goes public in 1999. That is bigger than any of us will ever realize. Absolutely big. In 98 is kind of like maybe the 85. That's when everything really blew up, but both channels were huge in 1998. My gosh, WWE goes to the next stratosphere with Austin. Mike Tyson is there. Goldberg. WCW had like 5 straight nitros at domes. I mean, you can't say enough about that. Kind of like with going public too, Nick. 2014, the network. The network was huge.
That changed the game, man. I see every pay-per-view now.
Yes.
I don't miss anything. And I'd argue 83 to like 90. And then 96 to like almost to the end of WCW. If you didn't get to live through those eras, you gotta be so, I guess too bad. Or go watch them on the network and watch them with an open mind. With not like, oh well, there's no acai moonsault in that Hogan Piper match. Yeah, I know, but look, watch the feud, watch the story. That's one thing I wish the network, speaking of it, would do, is throw years together for us. Yeah. So we could watch all the events. Even, here's a house. If you want to skip it, let me skip it. Here's the house. This was a major house show where this belt took here. Then you watch SmackDown, you watch Raw, you watch the pay-per-views, and you could watch year by year rather than just having to, because I try to do that, go year to year, but you got to click back and forth, and it's kind of a hassle to not skip things. And this is the way that we see it, and I hope we justified our reasonings well enough to people.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any wrong answers either. I mean, unless you just come up with some crazy year, like, But anyway, I don't think there's any wrong answers in any of the ones we mentioned or the honorable mentions. So please give us your opinion. Give us 5 or just give us number 1, whatever you think. What do you think about this year? We would appreciate it very much. The feedback helps us grow the audience for sure. So, Nick, appreciate it as always, man.
Thank you for having me. Have a good one, man.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Pleasure's all yours, Bucky boys.